The morning rush at the downtown cafe was in full swing. Every table was packed with people hunched over laptops, students cramming for exams, and business folks having their pre-work meetings. The air smelled like fresh espresso and warm pastries, and the constant hum of conversation mixed with the hissing of the coffee machines created that familiar chaotic energy. Rachel sat at a small corner table, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. She'd gotten there early specifically to claim this spot. It was her favorite table because it had an outlet nearby and just enough distance from the counter to avoid the constant traffic. Her coffee sat beside her, barely touched and probably cold by now. She was too focused on finishing an article about budget-friendly recipes for her food blog. The cafe had gotten progressively more crowded in the last 30 minutes. People were now hovering near tables, hoping someone would leave soon. Rachel could feel their eyes on her, silently judging how long she'd been sitting there. She tried to ignore the guilt. She'd bought her coffee fair and square, and she had work to do. That's when she noticed him. A man stood near her table looking around the packed cafe with tired eyes. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing faded jeans and an old navy jacket that had seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd forgotten to comb it that morning. In one hand, he held a large coffee cup, and in the other, a small paper bag that probably contained a muffin or croissant. He caught her looking and gave a small, apologetic smile. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet and polite. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but would you mind if I sat here? I've been walking around for 10 minutes and everything's completely full." Rachel glanced at the empty chair across from her. She usually preferred having the table to herself. It was easier to focus, and she didn't have to worry about disturbing anyone with her typing or taking phone calls. But looking at the man's weary face, something in her softened. "Sure, no problem," she said, quickly moving her bag from the chair to the floor beside her. "It's crazy in here today." "Thank you so much," he said, genuine relief washing over his face. "I really appreciate it. I'm Michael, by the way." "Rachel," she replied with a small smile before turning back to her laptop. Michael settled into his chair carefully, as if trying not to take up too much space. He pulled out a worn paperback book from his jacket pocket and set it on the table. The cover was so faded Rachel couldn't make out the title. He opened his paper bag and took out a blueberry muffin, breaking off small pieces as he began to read. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Rachel appreciated that he wasn't trying to force conversation. So many times when she'd shared tables before, people felt obligated to chat, which always disrupted her workflow. But Michael seemed perfectly content to sit quietly with his book and coffee. About 20 minutes passed. Rachel was deep into editing a particularly tricky paragraph when Michael's phone buzzed on the table. She couldn't help but glance over as his expression changed instantly. The relaxed look disappeared, replaced by concern. He picked up the phone, his brow furrowed as he quickly typed a response. The phone buzzed again almost immediately. Then again, Michael let out a soft sigh, the kind that comes from deep exhaustion rather than simple frustration. He typed out longer messages now, his jaw tight with concentration. "Everything okay?" Rachel found herself asking, surprising herself with the question. Michael looked up, seeming startled that she'd spoken. "Oh yeah. Sorry, I hope the buzzing isn't bothering you. Just some family stuff." "No, it's fine," Rachel assured him. "I was just taking a break anyway." He gave her a grateful look and went back to his phone for one more message before setting it down firmly on the table, as if forcing himself to stop checking it. They went back to their respective tasks. But Rachel found it harder to concentrate now. She'd caught a glimpse of his phone screen during one of those messages. There'd been a photo of a little girl as his wallpaper. His daughter, probably. She wondered what kind of family stuff required so many urgent messages on a Tuesday morning. The cafe continued to buzz around them. A group of college students nearby were having an animated debate about some movie. The barista called out names for orders. Someone dropped a plate and the crash made half the cafe jump. Through it all, Rachel and Michael remained in their little bubble of quiet productivity at their corner table. Around 11 o'clock, Michael closed his book and finished the last of his coffee. He started gathering his things, carefully folding the paper bag and tucking his book back into his jacket pocket. "Thanks again for letting me sit," he said, standing up. "You really saved me this morning. I had to get out of the house for a bit and I didn't realize everywhere would be this packed." "No worries at all," Rachel replied. "I know how it is." Sometimes you just need a change of scenery to think straight. Michael paused as if he wanted to say something more, but then just nodded and headed toward the door. Rachel watched him leave, then shook her head and went back to her article. Strange how you could share a table with someone for an hour and come away feeling like you'd had a meaningful interaction without actually talking much at all. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the cafe at her usual time. She'd developed a routine over the past few months of working there 3 days a week. Same table if possible, same order, same productive morning hours before the afternoon slump hit. She was settling in with her laptop when she heard that now familiar voice. "Is this seat taken, or are you expecting someone?" Rachel looked up to see Michael standing there with the same tired smile, the same casual clothes, the same coffee and paper bag combination. "Oh, hi," she said, genuinely surprised. "No, go ahead. It's all yours." "Thanks," he said, sitting down like they were old friends resuming their spot. "I promise I'm not stalking you. This cafe just happens to make the best coffee in a 10-block radius." Rachel laughed. "No judgment here. I'm here 3 times a week minimum. I think the baristas know my order before I say it now." "That's the sign of a good local spot," Michael said, pulling out his book again. "When they start making your drink the moment you walk through the door." This time they did exchange a few more words throughout the morning. Small comments about the weather, which had turned rainy overnight. A shared laugh when someone's phone alarm went off loudly and they fumbled to silence it. A recommendation from Michael about the lemon poppy seed muffins being better than the blueberry ones. When Michael's phone started buzzing again with that same concerned expression crossing his face, Rachel pretended not to notice. Everyone had their struggles, their complicated situations. She wasn't going to pry into a stranger's life, even a stranger who was becoming a familiar face. The third time Rachel saw Michael at the cafe, it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like a routine. She'd arrived first that morning and was already settled into their usual corner table when he walked in. His eyes scanned the crowded room until they landed on her, and his face brightened with recognition. "Good morning," he said, approaching with his coffee. "Mind if I join you again?" "I was actually saving it for you," Rachel admitted, gesturing to the empty chair. "Figured you'd show up." Something about that simple statement seemed to mean a lot to him. His smile became more genuine, less tired around the edges. "That's really kind of you. Most people guard their table space like treasure around here." "Well, you're quiet and you don't steal my outlet, so you're basically the ideal table partner," Rachel joked. Over the next 2 weeks, their morning meetups became an unspoken arrangement. Whoever arrived first would claim the table and wait for the other. They'd settled into an easy rhythm. Some mornings they'd chat more. Other days they'd work in comfortable silence. Just 2 people sharing space without any pressure or expectations. Rachel learned things about Michael in small pieces, like putting together a puzzle one bit at a time. He was a single dad. That much became clear from how often his daughter came up in conversation. Her name was Lily, and she was 7 years old. The way Michael's entire face transformed when he talked about her was something special. His eyes would light up and that constant tiredness would fade for a moment. "She's obsessed with dinosaurs right now," he told Rachel one morning, showing her a photo on his phone. A little girl with dark curly hair and missing front teeth grinned at the camera, holding up a plastic T-Rex. "Last week she informed me that the velociraptors in the movies are completely inaccurate. She was genuinely upset about it." Rachel laughed. "She sounds amazing. How old did you say she was? 7? That's pretty advanced for 7. She's smart," Michael said with obvious pride. "Sometimes too smart for her own good. Last month she used logic and debate tactics to argue why she should be allowed to stay up past her bedtime. I didn't even realize I was losing the argument until it was over." "Sounds like you've got your hands full," Rachel said. "You have no idea," Michael replied, but his tone was full of affection. What Rachel noticed, though, was that Michael never really talked about what he did for work. Whenever the conversation drifted that direction, he'd give vague answers about working from home and having flexible hours. She assumed maybe he did freelance work like she did, or perhaps he was between jobs and didn't want to talk about it. Given his worn clothes and modest demeanor, she figured money might be tight. She understood that. She was barely making rent most months herself. Michael seemed genuinely interested in Rachel's work, though. He asked thoughtful questions about her blog, about the challenges of freelance writing, about her dream of someday publishing a book. Most people's eyes glazed over when she talked about writing, but Michael actually listened. He'd remember details from previous conversations and follow up on them. "How did that article about meal prep turn out?" he asked one morning. "The one you were struggling with last week?" Rachel was surprised he remembered. "Oh, I finally finished it. Took forever to get the tone right. I wanted it to feel helpful without being preachy, you know?" "That's a tough balance," Michael agreed. "But I bet you nailed it. You have a way of explaining things that makes them feel accessible." It was a small compliment, but it meant more to Rachel than he probably knew. Her writing often felt invisible in the vast ocean of content online. Having someone actually pay attention and offer encouragement felt rare and valuable. Their friendship had an interesting quality to it. They were cafe friends existing in the specific time and space, but they didn't exchange numbers or make plans outside those walls. It was like they'd created this little sanctuary where they could both just be themselves for a couple of hours, before returning to whatever complicated lives they led outside. Then came the rainy afternoon that changed things. Rachel had been at the cafe for about an hour when the sky opened up. Rain hammered against the windows, and the temperature dropped noticeably. She'd been so focused on her work that she hadn't checked the weather. Now her laptop was down to 15% battery, and she realized with growing horror that she'd left her charger at home. No, she muttered, watching the battery percentage tick down to 14%. She had 3 hours of work left to do and no way to finish it without power. Michael looked up from his book. "Everything all right?" "I'm an idiot," Rachel said, frustrated with herself. "Left my charger at home and I've got a deadline in 5 hours. This article absolutely has to be done today." Without hesitation, Michael reached into his bag and pulled out a laptop charger. "What kind do you need?" Rachel told him, and he checked the connector. "You're in luck, this one should work." He handed it across the table. "Are you sure? Don't you need it?" "I'm not using my laptop today," he said. "Just reading. Besides, I'm heading out in about 30 minutes anyway." "Keep it for as long as you need. You can give it back tomorrow." Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her. "You're a lifesaver. Seriously. Thank you so much." "It's just a charger," Michael said with a shrug. No big deal. But it was a big deal to Rachel. In a city where everyone was always rushing, always focused on their own problems, having someone offer help without expecting anything in return felt significant. It was such a simple gesture, but it reminded her that good people still existed. The next morning, Rachel arrived at the cafe early, carrying Michael's charger carefully in her bag. She'd wrapped it in a small towel to keep it safe. When Michael walked in and saw her waiting, he smiled and headed straight for their table. "You saved my life yesterday," Rachel said, handing back the charger. "I finished the article with 20 minutes to spare." "Glad it worked out," Michael said, tucking the charger away. "Did the client like it?" "Haven't heard back yet, but at least I met the deadline. That's half the battle in freelancing." They fell into their usual routine, but something felt slightly different. They'd crossed some invisible line from strangers who shared a table to actual friends who looked out for each other. The conversations became a little longer, a little more personal. Michael mentioned that Lily's school was having a science fair and she was building a volcano. He seemed stressed about helping her with it while keeping up with work. Rachel shared that her landlord had just raised her rent and she was trying to figure out if she needed to find a cheaper place even though she loved her neighborhood. These weren't deep, dark secrets. They were just the everyday struggles that normal people dealt with. But sharing them made their friendship feel more real, more grounded in the actual lives they were living. One morning, Michael showed up looking particularly exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hair more disheveled than usual, and he'd apparently forgotten to bring any food with him. He just sat down heavily and stared at his coffee like it held all the answers to life's problems. "Rough night?" Rachel asked gently. Michael rubbed his face with both hands. "Lily was up until 2 in the morning with a fever. Took her to urgent care, got home at 4, had to be up at 6 to get ready for the day. I'm running on fumes right now." "Is she okay?" "Yeah, the doctor said it's just a virus. She needs rest and fluids. My neighbor is watching her today, but I can't exactly focus on anything." He gestured vaguely at his book, which sat unopened on the table. Rachel studied him for a moment. "You should probably be home with her." I know, Michael admitted, but I also needed 30 minutes to just breathe and drink coffee before I completely lose my mind. Single parenting is no joke. Rachel couldn't imagine handling everything he was dealing with. Work, a sick kid, no partner to share the load. And he still showed up to the cafe trying to maintain some piece of normalcy in his life. She respected that. Well, for what it's worth, you're doing a great job, she said. Lily's lucky to have a dad who cares so much. Michael looked at her with genuine gratitude. Thanks. Some days I really need to hear that. They sat together quietly after that, Rachel working on her laptop while Michael just rested. Sometimes friendship wasn't about filling silence with words. Sometimes it was just about being present while someone caught their breath. 3 weeks had passed since that first morning when Rachel let Michael sit at her table. What started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into the most genuine friendship she'd had in years. They'd become fixtures at that corner table, so much so that the baristas started calling it their spot, and would sometimes hold it for a few minutes if they saw one of them coming. But this particular Tuesday morning, something was different the moment Michael walked through the door. Rachel knew right away. She'd gotten good at reading his moods. Usually, even on his tired days, he'd have that small smile when he saw her. Today there was nothing. His shoulders were slumped, his jaw was tight, and his eyes had that distant look of someone barely holding it together. He dropped into his chair without even greeting her first, which was completely unlike him. He set his coffee down so roughly that some of it splashed onto the table. He didn't seem to notice. "Michael?" Rachel said quietly, closing her laptop. "What's going on?" For a long moment he didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at nothing, running his hands through his hair over and over. It was a gesture she'd seen him do when he was stressed, but this was different. This was someone on the edge of breaking down completely. "I don't know what to do," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I honestly don't know what to do anymore." Rachel waited, giving him space to collect his thoughts. She'd learned that sometimes people just needed someone to listen, not to fix things or offer advice right away. "Lily's been sick for almost a week now," Michael continued, the words tumbling out. "The fever keeps coming back. I've taken her to the doctor twice. They keep saying it's viral, give it time, keep her hydrated. But she's miserable, and I feel completely helpless." "That sounds really scary," Rachel said softly. "And my babysitter quit yesterday. Just quit. No warning, nothing. She got another job offer and left me hanging. I've got work deadlines that I absolutely cannot miss, and I have no one to watch Lily. My parents live 6 hours away. My sister's overseas. I have nobody." Rachel could hear the desperation in his voice. She'd never seen him like this. Michael was usually so composed, so put together despite whatever he was dealing with. Seeing him unravel like this made her heart ache. "I've been trying to work while taking care of her, but it's impossible. She needs attention every 5 minutes. She's scared because she doesn't feel well, and she just wants me to sit with her. But I'm staring at my computer screen trying to finish things, and I'm doing neither job well. I'm failing as a dad and failing at work, and He trailed off, shaking his head. "You're not failing as a dad," Rachel said firmly. "You're doing your best in an impossible situation. That's not the same thing." Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Doesn't feel that way." They sat in silence for a moment. Rachel's mind was racing. She knew what she was about to offer was probably crossing some kind of boundary. They were cafe friends, not real-life friends. They'd never even exchanged phone numbers. She didn't know where he lived, had never been to his home, had never even met Lily in person despite hearing so much about her. But looking at Michael's exhausted, desperate face, she couldn't just sit there and do nothing. "Let me help," she said. Michael looked up at her, confused. "What?" "Let me watch Lily for you. Tomorrow or whenever you need. I can come over for a few hours while you work. I'm good with kids. I used to babysit all through college, and I've got nieces and nephews. I know how to handle sick kids." "Rachel, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. Look, I know we don't know each other that well, but I can see you're drowning here. And if I can help, even just for one afternoon so you can catch up on work, then why wouldn't I?" Michael stared at her like she'd just offered him a winning lottery ticket. You would really do that? Of course I would. What else are friends for? The word friends seemed to hit him hard. His eyes got a little watery and he looked away quickly, blinking. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Give me your number, tell me when you need me, and I'll be there. They exchanged numbers right there, which felt like a bigger step than it probably should have. Michael looked at his phone for a long moment after saving her contact, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Tomorrow? He asked. Would tomorrow work? I have a meeting I absolutely cannot reschedule, and it's going to take at least 3 hours. Tomorrow works perfect. Just text me your address and what time you need me. That evening, Rachel got the text. When she saw the address, she had to read it 3 times to make sure she'd gotten it right. It was in Riverside Heights. The Riverside Heights, the neighborhood where penthouse apartments started at several $1 million, where celebrities and tech executives lived, where she'd once gone just to walk around and daydream about what it would be like to afford even a studio there. She stared at her phone screen, completely confused. Maybe she'd copied the address wrong. Maybe there was a small affordable building tucked away in that neighborhood that she didn't know about. That had to be it. Michael wore the same rotation of old clothes every week. He was stressed about childcare costs. He drank regular drip coffee, not the expensive specialty drinks. Nothing about him screamed money. The next morning, Rachel took the bus to Riverside Heights, still half convinced she had the wrong address. But when she arrived at the building, there it was, exactly matching the address Michael had sent. She stood outside for a moment, looking up at the gleaming glass tower. This couldn't be right. She texted Michael that she was outside, and he replied immediately saying he'd come down to get her. Maybe he worked here, she thought. Maybe he was house-sitting or had a friend who lived in the building. But when Michael appeared in the marble lobby, looking sheepish and nervous, her confusion only grew. Hey, he said quietly. Thanks again for doing this, really. No problem, Rachel replied, looking around at the fancy lobby with its modern art and designer furniture. So, where exactly are we going? Michael pressed the button for the elevator. A private elevator, the kind that only went to 1 residence per floor. Rachel's stomach flipped. Michael, what floor do we? Penthouse, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. It was just the 2 of them in the mirrored space. Rachel caught her reflection and saw her own shocked expression. She was wearing her regular jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a messy bun, carrying her worn backpack. She looked exactly like what she was, a struggling freelance writer who shopped at thrift stores. The elevator rose smoothly and silently. Rachel's mind was spinning. None of this made sense. Michael couldn't live in a penthouse. That was impossible. People who lived in penthouses didn't wear faded jeans and worry about babysitter costs. They didn't sit in crowded cafes. They didn't need to share tables with strangers. The elevator doors opened directly into an apartment. Not an apartment. A penthouse floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The morning light poured in, making everything look like it was glowing. The furniture was elegant and expensive, but somehow still felt homey. Artwork hung on the walls, real artwork that probably cost more than Rachel made in a year. The kitchen had marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Everything was pristine and beautiful and completely, utterly confusing. Daddy, a small voice called out. A little girl came running from one of the rooms. She had those same dark curls from the photo, pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing pajamas with dinosaurs on them and fuzzy slippers. Despite being sick, her face lit up when she saw her dad. Hey, sweetie, Michael said, kneeling down to her level. How are you feeling? A little better, Lily said, then noticed Rachel. Who's that? This is my friend Rachel. She's going to hang out with you this morning while Daddy has to work. Is that okay? Lily studied Rachel with the serious expression of a child deciding whether to trust someone new. Then she smiled. Do you like dinosaurs? I love dinosaurs, Rachel managed to say, still trying to process everything. Okay, you can stay, Lily declared, then coughed into her elbow like she'd been taught. Michael showed Rachel where everything was. The medicine schedule, Lily's favorite snacks, the TV remote, emergency numbers. The whole time, Rachel felt like she was in a dream. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Michael's life. When Lily went to get her favorite stuffed animal to show Rachel, Michael finally turned to face her fully. I know you have questions, he said quietly. And I promise I'll explain everything. After Lily goes down for her nap, can we talk? Rachel just nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet, and she had no idea which way was up anymore. Rachel sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by plastic dinosaurs that Lily had carefully arranged in what she called the correct prehistoric timeline. The little girl was sweet and funny, and under different circumstances Rachel would have been completely enjoying herself. But her mind kept wandering to the massive windows, the expensive furniture, and the impossible situation she'd found herself in. Lily was explaining why the pterodactyl wasn't technically a dinosaur when she started yawning. Her energy was fading, which made sense given she was still recovering from being sick. "I think somebody needs a nap," Rachel said gently. "I'm not tired," Lily protested, even as her eyes drooped. "How about we read a story first? Your dad said you have some books in your room." That perked Lily up a bit. She took Rachel's hand and led her down a hallway lined with family photos. Rachel couldn't help but notice them as they walked. Michael with Lily as a baby, Lily's first birthday, beach vacations, and several photos of a beautiful woman who must have been Lily's mom. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. In every picture with Michael, they looked genuinely happy. Lily's room was like any 7-year-old's room, just bigger. Toys organized in bins, drawings taped to the walls, a bookshelf overflowing with stories. It was the most normal part of the penthouse, and somehow that made Rachel feel a little better. They read 2 books about dinosaurs, and by the end of the second one, Lily was fast asleep. Curled up with her stuffed triceratops, Rachel carefully pulled a blanket over her and tiptoed out of the room. Michael was in the kitchen making tea. His laptop was closed on the counter and he looked nervous. Actually nervous, like he was about to have the most difficult conversation of his life. "She's out," Rachel said quietly. "Fell asleep halfway through the second book." "Thank you," Michael said, handing her a cup of tea.
For everything.
"For being so good with her, for not running out of here the second you saw this place." Rachel accepted the tea and sat down at the kitchen island. The marble was cool under her hands. She took a deep breath. "I think you need to tell me what's going on, because I'm really confused right now." Michael nodded and sat down across from her. He looked more nervous than she'd ever seen him, even more than that day when he'd been so stressed about Lily being sick. "My full name is Michael Chen," he began, "and I'm the founder and CEO of Tech Vision Solutions." Rachel's eyes widened. She knew that company. Everyone knew that company. It was one of the biggest tech firms in the country, worth hundreds of millions, maybe billions. She'd read articles about it, seen their products advertised everywhere. "You're that Michael Chen?" she said, her voice barely working. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I am." Rachel set down her tea carefully, worried she might drop it. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I don't understand. Why were you sitting in that cafe every morning dressed like a regular person?" Michael finished for her. "Because I wanted to be a regular person at least for a couple of hours a week." He ran his hand through his hair, that familiar, stressed gesture. "After my wife died 3 years ago, everything changed. Suddenly I was a single dad trying to run a company and everyone around me had an agenda. Every conversation was about business. Every friendship felt fake. People wanted investments, connections, jobs, opportunities. Nobody just wanted to know me as Michael, the guy trying to figure out how to braid his daughter's hair or remember to pack the right snack in her lunchbox." Rachel listened, her mind racing to reconcile the Michael she knew with this revelation. "I started going to that cafe about 6 months ago," he continued. "I'd dress down, leave my fancy watch at home, drive my old college car instead of the one the company provides. And for those couple of hours, I could just be a regular guy reading a book and drinking coffee. No one recognized me. No one wanted anything from me. It was the only time I felt like I could breathe." "But why didn't you tell me?" Rachel asked, and she could hear the hurt in her own voice. "We've been meeting for weeks. I told you about my money struggles, about my rent going up. I complained to you about freelance rates and client budgets. I must have sounded so ridiculous." "No," Michael said firmly, leaning forward. "That's exactly the point. You didn't sound ridiculous. You sounded real. You talked to me like I was just another person struggling to make it in this city. Do you know how rare that is for me? How valuable. I offered you half my muffin once," Rachel said, almost laughing at the memory. "I thought you might be having money trouble." "I know," Michael said, and he smiled. And that meant more to me than you could possibly understand. That you would share something with me just because you thought I might need it. Not because you wanted something from me, but because you're genuinely kind. Rachel stood up and walked over to the windows, looking out at the city spread below. From up here, everything looked small and manageable. But down there, in the real world, nothing felt manageable at all. I feel like an idiot, she said. I should have known. I should have figured it out. Why? Michael asked, joining her at the window. I did everything I could to make sure you wouldn't. That was the whole point. But I told you everything about my life. My struggles, my dreams, my fears about never making it as a writer. And the whole time you were... She gestured around the penthouse. This. And I told you about being a single dad who feels like he's failing all the time, Michael said. About missing my wife. About being so tired I can't see straight. About feeling isolated and alone. That was all true. Money doesn't fix those problems. It just changes what they look like. Rachel turned to face him. So what happens now? Do we just pretend these past few weeks didn't happen? Do we go back to being strangers? Is that what you want? Michael asked, and she could see genuine fear in his eyes. I don't know what I want, Rachel admitted. I need to think. This is a lot to process. I understand, Michael said. Take all the time you need. But Rachel, please understand something. The person you met in that cafe, the person you've been having coffee with every morning, that's the real me. This, he gestured around the penthouse, this is just where I live. It doesn't define who I am. At least I don't want it to. Lily's voice called out from her bedroom. Daddy, Rachel? I'm awake. I should go, Rachel said. You should be with her. Will you come back tomorrow? Michael asked. To the cafe, I mean. Can we at least talk more? Rachel looked at him for a long moment. Despite everything, despite the shock and confusion, she could still see the same person she'd been sharing a table with for weeks. The tired dad who loved his daughter. The guy who'd lent her his charger without thinking twice. The friend who'd listened to her talk about her writing dreams like they actually mattered. I'll be there, she said finally. Same table, same time. The relief on Michael's face was obvious. Thank you. Rachel gathered her things and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Michael picking up Lily, who wrapped her arms around his neck. They looked like any father and daughter, dealing with a sick day at home. The only difference was the backdrop of luxury behind them. On the bus ride home, Rachel stared out the window without really seeing anything. Her whole perception of the past few weeks had shifted. Every conversation, every shared moment, every small kindness took on new meaning. Michael had chosen to be vulnerable with her, to be real with her, when he could have just stayed in his wealthy bubble and avoided normal people altogether. But at the same time, she felt deceived. She'd opened up about her struggles to someone who could never truly understand what it was like to worry about making rent or losing a client. Could their friendship survive this revelation? Did she even want it to? Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Just 3 words. Thank you again. She stared at the message for a long time before responding. Anytime. Because despite everything, despite her confusion and hurt and shock, she knew one thing for certain. Michael had trusted her with his daughter. That wasn't something people did lightly, no matter how much money they had, and maybe, just maybe, that meant something real had been built between them at that corner table. Whether that was enough to bridge the enormous gap between their actual lives, she had no idea. But she'd show up tomorrow and find out. The city passed by her window as the bus rolled on. Somewhere up in one of those glass towers, Michael was probably sitting with Lily, reading her dinosaur books and checking her temperature. And tomorrow morning, if everything went according to plan, he'd walk into that cafe wearing his old jacket and faded jeans, looking for their table. Rachel just had to decide if she could see past the penthouse and remember why she'd offered him a seat in the first place. Because he'd asked politely, because the cafe was crowded, because it was a simple, kind thing to do. Sometimes the simplest gestures led to the most complicated situations. But maybe complicated didn't have to mean bad. Maybe it just meant real. Rachel didn't sleep well that night. She kept replaying every conversation she'd had with Michael, seeing them all through a new lens. Every time she'd complained about money, every time she'd shared her budget-friendly recipes or talked about taking the bus, had he been secretly judging her? Pitying her? Or had he genuinely cared like she thought he did? By morning, she'd talked herself out of going to the cafe at least 5 times. But something kept pulling her back to the original plan. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need for closure. Or maybe, buried under all the confusion and hurt, she still considered Michael a friend. She arrived at the cafe early, earlier than usual. The morning crowd hadn't hit yet, and their corner table was empty. She claimed it, ordered her regular coffee, and sat down with her laptop. But she couldn't focus on work. She just stared at the screen, her mind elsewhere. 20 minutes later, Michael walked through the door. He was wearing those same faded jeans and old jacket. But now Rachel couldn't unsee what she knew. The watch he wasn't wearing probably cost more than her car. The casual clothes were a costume, carefully chosen to blend in. Even the way he carried himself seemed different now that she knew the truth. Their eyes met across the cafe. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Michael walked over slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might break. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," Rachel replied. He sat down, and the silence between them felt heavy. This was the same table where they'd shared so many easy conversations. Now every word felt weighted with meaning. "I'm sorry," Michael said finally. "I know I said that yesterday, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for not being honest with you from the start." Rachel wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I've been thinking about this all night, trying to figure out how I feel, and?" Michael asked, clearly nervous about her answer. "And I'm still not entirely sure," Rachel admitted. "Part of me is angry. Part of me feels stupid for not figuring it out. But another part of me understands why you did it." Michael looked surprised. "You do?"
"I think so," Rachel said.
"You wanted something real, something that wasn't about your money or your company. I get that. I really do. But Michael, I told you things I wouldn't have said if I'd known who you were. I made myself vulnerable in a way that feels really unbalanced now." "I was vulnerable too," Michael said. "Everything I told you about struggling as a single dad, about feeling lonely and isolated, about missing my wife, that was all real. That was me being more honest than I've been with anyone in years." Rachel studied his face. He looked tired, but then again, he always looked tired. That hadn't been an act. The exhaustion was real. The love for his daughter was real. The grief in his eyes when he mentioned his wife was real. "Why that cafe?" she asked. "Out of all the places in the city, why there?" "It's far enough from my office that no one from work goes there," Michael explained. "And it's in a neighborhood where people mind their own business. I could just be another guy with a laptop. Nobody cared who I was. Until I let you sit down." "Until you let me sit down," Michael agreed, and a small smile crossed his face. "Which was the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." Rachel felt something soften inside her. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt, but it was hard when he looked at her like that. "Lily asked about you this morning," Michael said. "Wanted to know if the nice dinosaur lady was coming back." That made Rachel smile despite herself. "She's a sweet kid. She is. And she liked you." "Kids are good judges of character." Michael paused. "Look, I know I messed this up. I should have told you sooner. But I was terrified that if you knew the truth, everything would change, and I wasn't ready to lose the one genuine friendship I'd found." "Everything has changed, though," Rachel pointed out. "Has it?" Michael asked. "I'm still the same person who sat at this table with you every morning. I still think your writing is incredible. I still remember that you take your coffee with way too much sugar, and that you have a deadline every Wednesday that stresses you out." "None of that was fake," Rachel sighed. "I know. That's what makes this so complicated." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the cafe fill up around them. Other people claiming tables, starting their days, living their normal lives. Everything looked the same as it always had, but somehow everything felt different. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said. "Anything. What do you want from this friendship? Like, what happens next? Do we keep meeting here and pretending you're just a regular guy? Do I come to your penthouse for dinner parties? I don't even know what this looks like." Michael thought about that for a long moment. "Honestly, I want it to look exactly like it did before. Same table, same time, same conversations. The only difference is you know the truth now. But we can't just ignore the elephant in the room," Rachel said. "Your life and my life are completely different, are they though?" Michael challenged gently. "You're a writer trying to make your mark. I run a company trying to make a difference. You worry about deadlines and difficult clients. I worry about board meetings and difficult investors. You're raising yourself in this city alone. I'm raising a daughter alone. Yeah, I have more money. But that doesn't mean my problems are any less real or that I need friendship any less than you do. Rachel had to admit he had a point. She'd been so focused on the wealth gap that she'd forgotten about all the things they actually had in common. I just don't want to be some charity case to you, she said quietly. Some poor writer you feel sorry for. Is that what you think? Michael asked, looking genuinely hurt. Rachel, you offered to watch my sick daughter. You saved my charger when I needed it. You listened to me talk about my problems without judging me. If anything, I'm worried that you see me as some out-of-touch rich guy who can't possibly understand real life. I don't think that, Rachel said. Then what do you think? Rachel looked at him, really looked at him. Past the revelation, past the shock, past all the noise in her head, she saw the same person who'd thanked her profusely for letting him sit down. The same person who remembered details about her work. The same dad who lit up when talking about his daughter. I think you're my friend, she said finally. And I think I'm mad at my friend for lying to me, but I also understand why he did it. And I think maybe we can figure this out if we're both willing to try. The relief on Michael's face was immediate.
Really? Really?
But we need some ground rules. Okay, Michael said, leaning forward. Like what? First, no more lies. Even small ones. If I ask you something, I need the truth. Agreed. Absolutely. Second, you need to understand that I can't always keep up with your lifestyle. If you invite me somewhere fancy, I might not have the right clothes or feel comfortable. You can't make me feel bad about that. I would never, and honestly, fancy isn't really my thing anyway. I spend most of my free time building Lego sets with Lily. That made Rachel laugh. Okay, third rule, you have to stop apologizing. What's done is done. We move forward from here. I can do that, Michael said. Any more rules? Just one more. Next time you need help with Lily, you ask me. Not because you think you're imposing, but because that's what friends do. Michael smiled, a real genuine smile that reached his eyes. Deal. They shook hands across the table, which was ridiculous and formal and somehow exactly what the moment needed. When they let go, something felt settled between them. Not perfect, not completely comfortable yet, but workable. So, Michael said, pulling out his worn book. Tell me about this article you're working on. Is it another recipe thing? And just like that, they fell back into their rhythm. Rachel opened her laptop and told him about the piece she was writing on meal planning for busy professionals. Michael listened and asked questions and offered thoughts. The cafe buzzed around them. People came and went. The barista called out orders. Over the next few weeks, their friendship found a new normal. Michael started being more open about his work, and Rachel realized it was actually fascinating hearing about the tech industry from someone on the inside. She met Lily a few more times and became her official favorite babysitter. Michael read drafts of Rachel's articles and gave surprisingly helpful feedback. One morning, about a month after the revelation, Michael showed up with an unusual expression on his face. I have a proposition for you, he said, and I need you to hear me out completely before you say no. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's not a promising start. My company is launching a new initiative. We're creating content about technology accessibility and how it impacts everyday people. We need someone who can tell real stories, who understands what it's like to live without unlimited resources, who can write in a way that connects with regular humans. Okay, Rachel said slowly. I want to offer you the position. Full-time, good salary, benefits, the whole thing. But before you think this is charity or that I'm just offering because we're friends, know that I've shown your writing to our hiring team without telling them who you were. They loved it. They want you. Rachel's heart was pounding. Michael, I don't know. The job is yours based on merit, he insisted. Yes, I recommended you, but that's what people do. They recommend talented people they know. This isn't about our friendship. This is about you being genuinely good at what you do. Rachel thought about her cramped apartment, her constant money stress, her dream of being a real writer instead of just a freelancer scraping by. This was everything she'd wanted. But was it right to accept it from Michael? Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. That evening, Rachel called her sister and talked through everything. Her sister said something that stuck with her. Opportunities don't care how they arrive. They just care what you do with them. The next morning at the cafe, Rachel gave Michael her answer. I'll take the job, on one condition. What's that? We still meet here. Same table, same time. No matter how crazy work gets, Michael grinned. I think I can manage that. A year later, they were still keeping that promise. The cafe had become so important to them that when the owner mentioned thinking about selling, Michael bought the whole place. Not to change it, but to make sure it stayed exactly as it was. He even expanded it so there would always be enough seats for everyone. Their corner table had a small plaque now that read, "Reserved for friends." The baristas still knew their orders. The regulars still nodded hello. And every morning, two people from completely different worlds sat down together to share coffee and conversation. Because in the end, the money didn't matter. The penthouses and the power didn't matter. What mattered was that one crowded morning, a woman had offered a seat to a stranger and both their lives had become richer for it. But as she packed up her things to leave that day, she realized something. For the first time in months of working at this cafe, she'd actually enjoyed sharing her table. Maybe tomorrow, if she got there first, she'd save the seat for him, just in case.